You know that strange feeling when a superhero franchise is trying to stay playful, while the entire cinematic universe around it feels like it's going through an identity crisis? That's honestly the first thing that crossed my mind when I sat down and started thinking about Shazam, Fury of the Gods. Not because the movie itself opens in a confused way. Actually, it opens with a very clear intention. But because the world around it, the DC film landscape, had shifted dramatically between the first film and this sequel. And yet, when the trailer first dropped, there was this immediate sense that the filmmakers weren't interested in changing the personality that made the original Shazam stand out. That first teaser almost felt like someone saying, "Look, we know the universe is chaotic right now, but this corner is still having fun." The trailer begins with something that immediately grounds the story again in the life of Billy Batson and his foster family. There's this slightly awkward teenage voiceover energy, the kind that makes you remember that beneath the lightning and muscle suit, Shazam is still a kid trying to figure out how to be a hero, while also dealing with the very normal insecurity of growing up. And what the trailer cleverly does right away is remind you of that central gimmick that made the first movie work so well. The humor of a child suddenly possessing the body and powers of a godlike adult superhero. You see quick flashes of Billy struggling with responsibility. Not in the heavy, brooding superhero way that a lot of comic book movies lean into, but in this very relatable, "Am I actually good enough for this?" way. There's a scene in the trailer where he's talking about feeling like a fraud, and it's played for laughs, but there's a subtle honesty underneath it. That insecurity becomes one of the emotional threads that the marketing leaned into. But then the trailer pivots. Suddenly the scale widens, because unlike the first film, which kept its conflict relatively intimate, Fury of the Gods introduces a much larger mythological threat. And you can feel that shift immediately once the villains appear. The camera cuts to ancient ruins, cracked statues, and glowing magical artifacts. The lighting gets darker. The music shifts into that deep orchestral rumble every superhero trailer seems contractually obligated to use these days. And then we meet the Daughters of Atlas. Now this is where the trailer gets interesting, because it isn't just presenting another generic world-ending villain. The tone suddenly leans into mythology, Greek mythology specifically. That's not something the first film explored deeply, even though Shazam's powers technically come from a group of mythological figures. Here, the trailer frames the conflict around stolen divine power. You hear one of the villains talking about how the powers of the gods were taken, and now they want them back. And that one line actually reframes the entire premise of the Shazam mythology, if you stop and think about it. Billy Batson didn't just receive magic powers. According to this interpretation, he inherited something that belonged to ancient gods, which means the villains aren't simply invading Earth. They're reclaiming something they believe was stolen from their world. It's a subtle narrative twist, but the trailer hints at it just enough to create intrigue without giving away the entire conflict. Visually, the trailer also makes it very clear that the sequel has a bigger budget and a broader playground. The action shots are larger, the environment's more elaborate. There's a dragon flying through a collapsing city, magical creatures roaming the streets, and huge bursts of lightning cracking across the sky in these wide cinematic shots that feel designed specifically for IMAX screens. But what I actually appreciated about the trailer is that despite all that spectacle, it keeps cutting back to the family dynamic, because that's really the heart of these movies. Billy isn't fighting alone. The entire foster family now shares the Shazam powers, which means the film is balancing multiple young characters who transform into adult superheroes. The trailer leans heavily into that dynamic. You see the team trying to coordinate during fights, failing spectacularly at times, arguing like siblings even while they're wearing superhero suits. There's this one moment where they're debating strategy mid-battle, and it perfectly captures the chaotic energy of teenagers suddenly being responsible for saving the world. It's messy, it's awkward, and it's very intentionally comedic. And that's something the marketing clearly wanted to emphasize. This movie is not trying to compete with the darker, more serious tone that some DC films have explored. Instead, it doubles down on its identity as the more light-hearted, fantasy-adventure corner of the universe. Another thing the trailer does effectively is introduce the main villains without over-explaining them. You see glimpses of three powerful figures who clearly have ancient authority and magical abilities that rival Shazam's lightning. They move through scenes with this calm, almost regal menace. Not the loud, chaotic villain type, more like mythological beings who see humanity as insignificant, which creates a really interesting contrast. On one side, you have these ancient daughters of Atlas, beings tied to the power structure of the gods. On the other side, you have a group of kids from Philadelphia who stumbled into divine powers and are still trying to figure out how to use them. That contrast alone sets up the central tension of the movie in a way that the trailer doesn't need to spell out directly. Then there's the visual motif that keeps popping up throughout the trailer, this glowing golden apple. Now, if you know a little bit about Greek mythology, you immediately recognize that as a potential reference to the golden apples tied to the Garden of the Hesperides. And if that connection is intentional, which it very much seems to be, it suggests that the film is leaning deeper into mythological storytelling than the first one ever did. So the trailer starts feeling less like a standard superhero sequel and more like a fantasy adventure story that just happens to feature superheroes, which honestly might be the smartest direction they could have taken. Because by the time the trailer reaches its final stretch, it's throwing out massive imagery. A dragon circling a city skyline, magical barriers forming across entire streets, lightning battles erupting between gods and teenagers. But right in the middle of all that chaos, there's still humor. Shazam making awkward jokes, the family bickering during missions, moments where the characters are clearly overwhelmed by the scale of what they're facing. And that combination, mythological stakes mixed with teenage awkwardness, really defines the identity the trailer is trying to sell. It doesn't pretend this is the most serious superhero movie ever made. It presents it more like a fantasy blockbuster that remembers superheroes can still be fun. And honestly, watching that trailer for the first time, I remember thinking something very specific. Not that the movie looked bigger, not that the villains looked scarier, but that the filmmakers clearly understood what made the first film work emotionally. Because at the center of all the lightning bolts, monsters, and ancient gods, this is still a story about a kid who finally found a family, and now he's terrified of letting them down. There's another detail in that trailer that becomes more noticeable the more times you watch it, and it's something a lot of blockbuster previews struggle with balancing: escalation without losing personality. Because the moment you start introducing mythological villains and dragons tearing through cities, there's always the risk that the movie forgets the very grounded emotional tone that made the original work. But the trailer for Shazam, Fury of the Gods, keeps quietly circling back to Billy's anxiety about growing up. There's a brief moment where he's sitting in what looks like a pediatrician's office or maybe a school counselor's room, and he's basically confessing that he feels like he's not a real hero. It's delivered with humor, but the subtext is clear. Billy Batson isn't worried about the villains yet. He's worried that everyone around him is eventually going to realize he has no idea what he's doing. And that's a fascinating emotional entry point for a sequel, because by the time a superhero movie reaches its second installment, the main character is usually portrayed as confident, experienced, fully formed. Billy isn't. He's older than he was in the first movie, sure, but emotionally, he's still stuck in that awkward transition phase where childhood is fading and responsibility is arriving faster than expected. The trailer quietly reinforces that theme through visual contrast. You'll see Billy in his normal teenage form looking uncertain and hesitant, and then it cuts to the fully transformed hero version played by Zachary Levi, who outwardly looks like a classic comic book champion. That contrast has always been the comedic engine of the character, but here it also becomes a psychological one. Because when Shazam stands next to the rest of the superhero family, each played by adult actors representing the foster kids' powered forms, the visual message is that these teenagers suddenly look like the Justice League. But inside, they're still kids arguing about tactics and making questionable decisions. And the trailer leans into that dynamic with a surprising amount of confidence. Instead of pretending they're seasoned heroes now, it embraces their chaos. There's a quick montage moment where they're trying to stop crime across the city, and things go sideways almost immediately. You see them crash into buildings, miss obvious targets, accidentally destroy property. It feels less like a polished superhero team and more like a group project where nobody read the instructions. That idea becomes even funnier when you realize who their enemies are. The villains in this film are portrayed as ancient figures tied directly to divine mythology. One of them is played by Helen Mirren, which on its own gives the antagonist side of the story an unexpected level of gravitas. And when she appears in the trailer, the tone shifts immediately. She isn't yelling or threatening in the exaggerated way blockbuster villains often do. Her performance in those brief glimpses feels calm, almost disappointed. Like she's looking at humanity and seeing a civilization that inherited powers it doesn't deserve. The second major antagonist revealed is played by Lucy Liu, whose character seems colder and more tactical, moving through scenes with a sense of quiet authority. Together, they represent something that feels more mythological than supervillainous. These are not criminals trying to conquer the world. They're divine figures who believe the balance of power has been disrupted, which makes the stakes in the trailer feel strangely philosophical beneath all the explosions. Because if the powers of Shazam originally came from ancient gods, and those gods, or their descendants, have now returned to reclaim them, then Billy and his family are technically standing in the middle of a cosmic inheritance dispute. That's a very different motivation compared to the typical superhero movie villain. And the trailer hints at this conflict without ever fully explaining it. Instead, it keeps dropping visual clues. Massive statues crumbling, magical energy crackling around ancient artifacts, creatures that clearly belong to a mythological world rather than the modern one. One of the most striking shots in the trailer shows a massive dragon sweeping down through a city street while civilians scatter in panic. It's the kind of image that instantly signals the scale of the sequel. The first, Shazam, had its share of fantasy creatures, but it mostly kept the action grounded in familiar urban environments. Here, the trailer suggests something much bigger. The barrier between mythological realms and the human world is starting to collapse. And visually, the film seems to embrace that idea with a surprising amount of color and spectacle. That's another thing worth mentioning about the trailer. In an era where many superhero movies lean into darker palettes and muted colors, Fury of the Gods looks bright. Lightning flashes in vivid gold. Costumes pop against the skyline. Even the magical effects feel almost storybook-like instead of gritty. It's a stylistic choice that makes the movie feel closer to a fantasy adventure than a traditional superhero battle. And honestly, that might be why the trailer feels refreshing, even when the genre itself is starting to feel crowded. Because instead of trying to outdo every other comic book movie in seriousness, the film seems comfortable leaning into a tone that's closer to a modern fairy tale. You can even feel that tone in the way the action scenes are edited in the preview. The battles look chaotic, yes, but they're also playful in rhythm. Characters shout jokes mid-fight. The family members interrupt each other while trying to coordinate attacks. It feels like watching siblings accidentally save the world, rather than trained warriors executing perfect strategies. There's one exchange near the end of the trailer where Shazam attempts a dramatic, heroic speech and immediately gets interrupted by someone else pointing out how ridiculous he sounds. And that moment perfectly captures the personality of the franchise. It's aware of superhero tropes. It knows the audience has seen dozens of grand speeches and slow-motion heroic poses. So instead of pretending those cliches don't exist, the film pokes fun at them while still delivering the spectacle. And then the trailer reaches its final run of images, where everything starts escalating quickly. Lightning storms, a dragon landing on top of a bridge, magical barriers rising across city streets. The Daughters of Atlas standing in the middle of destruction, with the calm confidence of beings who have watched civilizations rise and fall. And right before the trailer cuts to black, there's a shot of Billy standing among the rest of the Shazam family, looking out at the approaching threat. Not confident, not fearless, just determined in that awkward teenage way that says he's going to try, even if he's pretty sure he might mess it up. And honestly, that single image might be the most important promise the trailer makes. Because while the scale of the story has grown dramatically, the heart of the movie still appears to be the same simple idea that made the original special. A kid who never felt like he belonged anywhere suddenly has the power of a god, and the terrifying responsibility that comes with it. When you really step back and think about the moment Shazam, Fury of the Gods was arriving in theaters, the timing itself tells a fascinating story about the superhero genre and the situation surrounding the DC film universe at that exact point. Because by the time this sequel was ready for release, the landscape around it had changed in ways nobody could have predicted when the first film came out. The original Shazam arrived during a period when DC was experimenting with tone. Some films leaned darker, others leaned lighter, and the studio was clearly still trying to figure out what direction the broader universe should take. But that first Shazam movie slipped into theaters almost like a charming underdog. It wasn't trying to compete with the massive scale of something like Avengers Endgame. Instead, it carved out its own identity. Smaller stakes, family-focused storytelling, and a sense of humor that felt closer to an 80s adventure movie than a traditional superhero epic. Audiences responded to that warmth. Critics noticed it too. Suddenly, this relatively modest DC film, directed by David F. Sandberg, had become one of the studio's most universally liked projects in years. Naturally, a sequel felt inevitable. But then something happened in the industry that reshaped the entire environment surrounding superhero movies. Time started stretching in unexpected ways. Originally, the follow-up was expected to arrive sooner. In fact, early development moved fairly quickly. The returning creative team began expanding the mythology, designing larger action sequences, and planning a story that would push the characters into a much bigger fantasy playground. Yet, the global film industry ran straight into one of the biggest disruptions in modern movie history, the COVID-19 pandemic. Production schedules across Hollywood were suddenly thrown into chaos. Movies that had carefully planned timelines found themselves paused, delayed, or reshuffled entirely. And while Fury of the Gods did eventually move into production, the ripple effects of that period reshaped the release calendar for almost every major studio, which meant that by the time the sequel was ready to reach audiences, several years had passed since the first film. In superhero terms, that's a very long gap. During that time, the genre itself had evolved. Marvel had continued expanding its cinematic universe with new phases of storytelling, streaming series, and interconnected narratives. DC, meanwhile, was undergoing its own transformation behind the scenes. Leadership changes, strategic shifts, and creative resets were happening simultaneously. At one point, it even became clear that the entire direction of DC's cinematic future was being reconsidered. This meant Warner Brothers found itself releasing the Shazam sequel during a transitional period. Almost like a film arriving at the end of one chapter, while another chapter of the universe was quietly being planned. But what's interesting is that the Shazam franchise never depended heavily on the broader continuity anyway. Unlike characters who were deeply tied to a large, interconnected storyline, Billy Batson's adventures always felt slightly self-contained. His world was Philadelphia. His supporting cast was his foster family, and his biggest emotional conflicts revolved around belonging rather than cosmic destiny. So even though the DC universe around him was shifting, the core identity of the series remained surprisingly stable. That stability actually became part of the marketing narrative. When trailers and promotional interviews began appearing, there was a noticeable emphasis on continuity with the original film. The same director was returning, the same cast was back. The same comedic tone was intact. In an environment where audiences were constantly hearing about cinematic universes rebooting or restructuring, that sense of familiarity may have been more valuable than it seemed. And then there was the release date itself. The film eventually landed in theaters in March of 2023, which is an interesting slot in the blockbuster calendar. It's not quite the traditional summer movie season, but it's close enough that studios often use it for big genre releases that they believe can dominate the early part of the year. By that time, the superhero genre had already delivered dozens of massive spectacles over the previous decade. Audiences had seen world-ending battles, multiverse collisions, and heroes from every corner of comic history. So, a film like Fury of the Gods had a slightly different challenge. It wasn't trying to introduce superheroes to the world anymore. It was trying to remind audiences why this particular hero and this particular tone still mattered. That's why the promotional campaign leaned so heavily into the family aspect of the story. Posters, trailers, interviews, everything emphasized that Billy wasn't alone anymore. The Shazam family had become a full team, and that team dynamic was something the genre hadn't explored quite the same way elsewhere. Most superhero franchises focus on individuals or professional teams, like the Avengers or the Justice League. But Shazam's team is literally a group of foster siblings. They argue like siblings, they joke like siblings, and when the world is in danger, they protect each other like a real family would. In some ways, that premise actually makes the film feel closer to classic adventure movies like The Goonies than to the traditional superhero blueprint. It's a group of young people discovering their courage together, and by the time Fury of the Gods finally reached theaters, that tone, optimistic, playful, slightly chaotic, felt almost nostalgic compared to the increasingly complex mythology dominating other comic book franchises. Which might be why so many people watching the trailers felt a sense of comfort seeing Billy Batson and his family back on screen. Because even though the cinematic universe around them had become unpredictable, their story still felt simple in the best possible way. A teenager with godlike powers, a family that finally gave him a home, and a world that suddenly needed them to step up again. And once you move past the release context and start looking at the actual people bringing these characters to life, something becomes very clear about Shazam, Fury of the Gods. This is one of the rare superhero franchises where the cast chemistry genuinely feels like the backbone of the entire experience. Not just the main star, not just the villains, but an entire ensemble that has to function almost like a real family. And that's a tricky balance for any movie to pull off, because each character technically exists in two forms: the teenage version and the adult superhero version. That concept alone could have become confusing or gimmicky, but the casting choices actually make it work surprisingly well. At the center of everything is Billy Batson's superhero form, played by Zachary Levi. Levi's performance was one of the defining elements of the first film, because he leaned heavily into the idea that Shazam isn't an experienced adult hero. He's essentially a teenager trapped inside the body of a very enthusiastic superhero. And in this sequel, that energy remains intact. Levi plays Shazam with this slightly exaggerated excitement, almost like someone who still can't believe they get to shoot lightning out of their hands. His comedic timing carries a lot of the movie's lighter moments, but there's also a subtle nervousness underneath the humor. You get the sense that Billy, even in his powered form, still feels like the least qualified person in the room. But the real emotional anchor of the character actually comes from Billy's teenage version, played again by Asher Angel. Angel's portrayal is quieter and more introspective. While Levi handles the bombastic superhero personality, Angel gives us the internal perspective of a kid who is slowly realizing that growing up means responsibilities you can't avoid. That dual performance, two actors essentially sharing one character, is a big part of why the Shazam concept works on screen. Then there's the foster family, which is where the film really expands its cast dynamic. Billy's closest friend, Freddie Freeman, returns again, played by Jack Dylan Grazer. Freddie is arguably the most enthusiastic superhero fan in the entire story. In the first movie, he practically treated Shazam like a real-life comic book come to life. And here, Freddie's role becomes even more interesting, because he isn't just the sidekick anymore. With the shared powers of the Shazam family, he gets to step into the hero role himself. His adult superhero version is played by Adam Brody, and Brody brings this slightly sarcastic, laid-back charisma that contrasts nicely with Freddie's excitable teenage personality. The rest of the foster siblings also return, and together they form the full Shazam team. Mary Bromfield is portrayed in her adult hero form by Grace Caroline Curry, who actually plays both the teenage and superhero versions of Mary in this sequel. That's a unique shift from the first film, and it gives the character a slightly more grounded presence compared to the others. Eugene Choi's powered version is played by Ross Butler, bringing a confident and somewhat composed superhero energy that contrasts with Eugene's more introverted teenage side. Pedro Peña's adult form appears as the incredibly muscular hero portrayed by DJ Catrona, which adds another layer of humor, considering Pedro is one of the more sensitive and emotionally gentle characters among the siblings. And Darla Dudley, easily the most enthusiastic member of the family, transforms into her superhero form, played by Megan Good, whose performance captures Darla's childlike excitement about having powers. When all of them are together on screen, the film starts to feel less like a solo superhero story and more like a chaotic group adventure. But of course, every story needs opponents powerful enough to challenge them. And that's where the sequel makes a very deliberate move by bringing in 3 mythological antagonists tied to the Daughters of Atlas. The first and most commanding presence among them is played by Helen Mirren, portraying Hespera. Casting Mirren immediately elevates the gravitas of the villain role. She carries herself with the kind of calm authority that makes the character feel ancient and powerful, without needing exaggerated theatrics. Then there's Calypso, portrayed by Lucy Liu. Liu's performance brings a colder, more calculating edge to the trio. Where Mirren's character often feels like a ruler addressing a problem, Liu's character feels more like a strategist, quietly planning how to reshape the world. The third sister, Anthea, is played by Rachel Zegler, and her presence adds an interesting emotional layer because her character doesn't quite fit the same villain mold as the others. Without diving into spoilers yet, Anthea's role introduces a slightly different perspective on the conflict between the Daughters of Atlas and Billy's family. Behind the camera, the movie again relies on director David F. Sandberg, whose background in horror filmmaking actually plays a surprising role in shaping the visual tone of the action scenes. Before directing Shazam, Sandberg was known for films like Lights Out and Annabelle Creation, both of which demonstrated his ability to build tension through atmosphere and visual composition. In Fury of the Gods, that experience shows up in subtle ways, especially when mythological creatures appear or when magical elements begin affecting the environment around the characters. The lighting gets dramatic. Shadows stretch across the frame. Even some of the creature designs feel slightly eerie, despite the movie's overall playful tone. And that mixture of horror-trained visual storytelling with a comedic superhero script creates an interesting flavor for the sequel. Because when you combine all of these elements, the returning family cast, the mythological villains, the director's stylistic instincts, you end up with a movie that isn't just expanding the scale of the first film. It's expanding the world around Billy Batson in a way that makes the story feel bigger, stranger, and a little more mythological than before. And what's fascinating about the cast choices in Shazam! Fury of the Gods is how much they lean into the idea of contrasts. Because the movie thrives on opposites. On one side, you have these kids, awkward, fumbling, incredibly relatable. And on the other, you have ancient, godlike figures who move with a sense of inevitability, like they've been around since the dawn of time. That contrast is part of what gives the trailer, and presumably the film itself, a very particular rhythm. Humor punctuated by awe, missteps followed by moments of genuine heroism. For example, there's a brief trailer shot where the family is trying to strategize during a citywide magical assault. Each powered-up sibling attempts their own tactic, and almost immediately, everything goes wrong. It's chaotic, loud, and funny, but it also underscores something crucial. These aren't polished superheroes yet. They're learning to work as a team, learning to trust their powers, and, importantly, learning to trust each other. That concept of growth within the family unit is actually quite unique in a superhero context. Most sequels focus primarily on external threats, but here the internal dynamics are just as important. The villains' interactions are equally layered. Helen Mirren's Hespera is commanding without being theatrical. She delivers her lines with this calm precision that makes it clear she's operating on a completely different timeline than the human characters. It's the kind of performance that immediately communicates authority without requiring exposition. Lucy Liu's Calypso balances that with meticulous planning, appearing in fleeting shots where her intentions are never fully revealed, creating intrigue. And Rachel Zegler's Anthea adds a subtle unpredictability. From what the trailer suggests, she's not purely antagonistic, which hints at potential complexity in the narrative. This trio isn't just a physical threat, they're intellectual and moral challenges as well. Another layer the trailer emphasizes is the setting. The original Shazam mostly centered in Philadelphia, grounding the story in an urban environment that feels familiar. This sequel, however, is expanding both horizontally and vertically. You see ancient ruins, colossal statues, magical artifacts, and creatures straight out of mythologies that feel almost tangible on screen. The trailer suggests that the conflict isn't just invading cities, it's reshaping reality around these kids, blending the mundane with the fantastical. And that's a tricky visual balance to strike, but the brief glimpses indicate a deliberate effort to maintain clarity amidst the chaos. The trailer also hints at the evolution of the family dynamic. The first movie was essentially about Billy finding his place. Now, he's one of many powered individuals. Coordinating with a team that's literally as inexperienced as he is presents both narrative and comedic opportunities. There's one memorable shot where the siblings are mid-battle, bickering and making mistakes, and yet somehow the moment feels authentic rather than forced. It's a reminder that the franchise's strength isn't just in lightning bolts and explosions. It's in the very human, messy relationships at the heart of the story. Music and sound design, while often overlooked in trailers, play a significant role here. The score balances moments of tension with playful, almost whimsical cues, which reinforces that this is a superhero movie that doesn't take itself too seriously. Even during the chaos, you can feel the emotional beats, the awe, the fear, the humor, all intertwined through careful auditory choices. That might seem subtle, but it's a defining factor in how audiences emotionally engage with what they're seeing. And then, of course, there's the visual effects work. The trailer doesn't shy away from showing large-scale magic battles, lightning strikes, and colossal threats, but it also hints at careful choreography. Unlike some sequels where effects dominate to the point of sensory overload, the shots in Fury of the Gods seem designed to maintain readability. You can track the characters, understand what's at stake, and feel the danger, all while enjoying the spectacle. That's not easy in a film juggling multiple powered characters, mythological villains, and expansive environments simultaneously. Finally, if you look at the pacing of the trailer, there's a clear rhythm. Setup, escalation, family moments, villain tease, and then massive spectacle. That structure gives you insight into how the film itself might unfold. It suggests that while the stakes are larger, the core formula remains. Human relationships first, superhero antics second. The trailer sells spectacle, but it doesn't sell heartlessness. And that's something that has been surprisingly rare in recent superhero films, especially in larger franchises where the spectacle often overshadows character development. By the time the trailer ends, the audience is left with a clear promise. This is a bigger, louder, more magical Shazam adventure. But at its core, it's still a story about a kid who's trying, often failing, but ultimately growing with a family that believes in him. And in a cinematic landscape increasingly dominated by multiverse chaos, endless reboots, and tonal confusion, that promise of consistent heart and humor is a statement in itself. And as you watch the trailer one more time, there's a subtlety that becomes really fascinating. The way the filmmakers are signaling character growth without ever needing to spell it out. You'll notice, for instance, brief shots of Billy pausing mid-action, looking uncertain, then gathering himself. That's something Levi nails in the superhero form. He carries the physicality of a fully grown hero, but peppers it with the hesitation and wonder of a child discovering his own power. Those micro-expressions are tiny storytelling cues that show us this isn't just a bigger movie in terms of effects. It's a bigger emotional journey as well. The humor in the trailer continues to be a standout because it's not just slapstick. There's timing, and there's an awareness of the superhero genre itself. Billy jokes about his size, his strength, or the ridiculousness of fighting a dragon with limited coordination. But the jokes also reveal character insight. The audience is reminded that while these heroes are capable of extraordinary feats, they are fundamentally kids learning to navigate extraordinary circumstances. That mix of vulnerability and bravado is something the first film excelled at, and it's clear the sequel intends to preserve it. The visual design also deserves attention. From the golden hues of lightning strikes to the ancient textures of statues and ruins, the trailer carefully signals a blending of modern urban life with mythological grandeur. That contrast is critical because it underscores the thematic tension of the movie: mortal teenagers confronting divine forces. You can sense that the production designers leaned heavily into this motif, ensuring that every environment reinforces the story's stakes visually. Even in fleeting shots of the city under magical assault, the framing and lighting are intentionally cinematic, giving the world a heightened, almost storybook quality without sacrificing realism. The trailer's editing also speaks volumes about the pacing of the actual film. Quick cuts show the family fumbling through battles, then slowing down to focus on moments of decision-making, hesitation, or awe. This alternation of tempo mirrors the core tension of the story: high-octane action balanced by character reflection. It's a rhythm that keeps the audience emotionally invested while allowing the chaos to remain coherent. You can almost hear the editor thinking, "Let's keep the energy alive, but never lose the human perspective at the center." Another layer comes from the way the villains are teased. Mirren, Liu, and Zegler's characters aren't shown in their entirety. There are carefully chosen glimpses of magical power, composure, and menace. This is intentional. The trailer doesn't want to reveal the full scope of their threat because mystery drives tension. Instead, it gives just enough visual cues to suggest they are an existential threat without turning the story into a standard hero faces villain narrative. The hints at mythology, the stolen powers, and the divine authority all indicate that the movie will explore themes beyond typical superhero fare: questions of inheritance, responsibility, and cosmic justice. Then there's the family team dynamic, which the trailer emphasizes repeatedly. Shots of siblings trying to coordinate powers mid-battle, making mistakes, and laughing through them signal the central thematic through line: growing together as a family. That element is essential because it differentiates Shazam from other superhero movies, where team interactions often feel scripted or overly serious. Here, failure is allowed, humor is organic, and camaraderie is believable. That's a rare quality in a franchise where stakes and spectacle frequently overshadow human connections. The trailer also subtly conveys how the sequel raises the stakes without losing accessibility. You see dragons, collapsing ruins, and magical storms. But these aren't just visual gimmicks. They're narrative tools showing how far Billy and the Shazam family must step out of their comfort zones. The threats are scaled to force growth, both individually and collectively. It's an escalation that respects the audience's intelligence. We understand the dangers, but we also understand that these characters are resourceful enough to navigate them, even if imperfectly. Sound design deserves another note here. The trailer doesn't rely on overwhelming noise or constant explosions. Instead, it layers magical effects with environmental sounds, like crumbling stone, thunderous impacts, and even subtle background dialogue. This treatment creates a tangible world that feels alive and responsive. The audience hears consequences of actions, whether it's Shazam missing a spell or a villain manipulating the environment, which enhances immersion and makes the stakes feel real, rather than purely cinematic. Finally, the trailer leaves you with a strong emotional hook. The final image of Billy standing among his family, facing an overwhelming threat, encapsulates the movie's promise. Heroism is messy, intimidating, and sometimes comic, but it's grounded in love, trust, and personal growth. Even with gods reclaiming power and dragons threatening the city, the heart of the story is still very human. That's the cleverness of the marketing. It sells spectacle and adventure while quietly reaffirming the franchise's emotional core. When you step back and analyze the trailer as a whole, it's clear that Shazam: Fury of the Gods is positioning itself as a hybrid, a superhero film that marries mythology, family dynamics, and comedy with epic action. It respects its own lineage while promising bigger thrills, and it does so without abandoning the traits that made the first film resonate. That delicate balancing act is rare, especially in an era of increasingly risk-averse blockbuster filmmaking, and it's exactly what makes the anticipation for this sequel intriguing. The trailer doesn't just hype a movie, it teases a continuation of a story about growth, responsibility, and finding one's place in a chaotic world. And it does so in a way that feels genuinely human. The story of Shazam, Fury of the Gods, picks up several years after the events of the first film, and immediately you can tell that the filmmakers wanted to explore the consequences of having divine power in a teenage body. Billy Batson, now more experienced but still fundamentally a kid at heart, has settled into a life that balances normal teenage concerns with superhero responsibilities. There's a clear sense that this is not just a continuation, but an evolution of the original story, because the stakes are naturally larger and the emotional context deeper. The opening sequences establish the status quo. Billy is living with his foster siblings, each of whom now also has the Shazam powers, though their mastery is inconsistent. You see Billy's internal conflict almost immediately. He's enjoying the freedom that the powers grant, but there's a lingering anxiety about whether he's truly ready to handle what's coming. This duality between youthful impulsiveness and adult-like responsibility forms the emotional backbone of the narrative. Unlike many sequels that rush into large-scale conflict, this story takes time to remind the audience of who Billy is and why his journey matters. The initial antagonist setup is subtle but effective. The daughters of Atlas, Hespera, Calypso, and Anthea, are introduced gradually, with scenes showing their divine realm and the tension within it. They believe that humanity has misused or improperly inherited the power of the gods, and they view the Shazam family as both a threat and an opportunity. The story cleverly establishes their motivations without resorting to heavy exposition. Visual storytelling, such as crumbling divine statues, glowing artifacts, and ritualistic movements, communicates both the age and the seriousness of their mission. This approach ensures that the audience understands the stakes instinctively, rather than through clunky dialogue dumps. Conflict begins when Hespera arrives on Earth, intent on reclaiming what she considers stolen power. The first encounters are tactical rather than destructive, with the Shazam family initially unprepared for adversaries who are not only physically powerful, but also deeply intelligent and strategic. This sets up an early tension. The heroes cannot simply rely on brute strength. They are forced to think critically, coordinate as a team, and confront their own inexperience. These early skirmishes serve both narrative and comedic purposes. Teenagers fumbling with godlike powers inevitably create chaos, but it's a chaos that develops character and builds empathy. One of the most engaging aspects of this portion of the story is how it expands the mythos without overwhelming the viewer. The writers integrate Greek mythology elements organically. The Daughters of Atlas are not just powerful villains, they carry philosophical weight. Their dialogue hints at themes of justice, inheritance, and balance between mortal and divine worlds. Billy's confrontation with them is as much ideological as it is physical. He begins to question not just how to defeat them, but whether the power he wields has responsibilities he hasn't fully understood. This elevates the narrative beyond a simple superhero versus villain plot. The midpoint of this first part is marked by a series of escalating challenges. The Shazam siblings attempt a coordinated defense of Philadelphia, which includes protecting civilians, mitigating collateral damage, and preventing the theft of powerful artifacts. Each family member's powers are showcased in ways that reflect their personalities. For example, Freddy's analytical approach contrasts with Pedro's more impulsive style, while Darla's enthusiasm sometimes causes mistakes, but also inspires ingenuity. The filmmakers use these differences to craft both humor and tension. Scenes of near disaster provide levity while simultaneously demonstrating growth. Each small success and failure reinforces the story's thematic core, that teamwork, trust, and adaptability are as important as raw power. An important narrative beat occurs when Billy begins to explore the deeper origins of his own powers. Unlike the first film, where the focus was primarily on the acquisition of magic, this story delves into the legacy of the gods themselves. Through interactions with magical relics and hints dropped by the antagonists, Billy learns that his abilities are tied to an ancient pact, a pact that places him at the center of a much larger cosmic balance. This revelation changes the story's stakes subtly but significantly. The conflict is no longer solely about stopping a villain. It is about understanding the moral and ethical responsibilities of wielding inherited divine authority. The first act culminates in a dramatic encounter in the city's central plaza, where the Daughters of Atlas test their powers against the Shazam family in a controlled but visually spectacular display. The sequence blends large-scale action with character development. Each hero makes mistakes that expose vulnerabilities, but these moments of failure feel earned and natural rather than contrived. The fight choreography emphasizes not just physical combat, but problem-solving and creativity. This approach reinforces the movie's emphasis on personal growth and family dynamics. Even in moments of intense danger, the story never loses sight of who these characters are or why the audience cares about them. By the end of this first portion, the narrative has established the fundamental tension for the film. A team of inexperienced teenage heroes, blessed with godlike powers, facing off against ancient, morally complex beings who see the world in fundamentally different terms. It also sets up several narrative threads for further exploration. The evolving dynamics among the foster siblings, the deeper understanding of divine power, and the personal growth of Billy as both a teenager and a superhero. These elements provide a strong foundation for the remainder of the story, ensuring that the audience is emotionally invested while anticipating larger conflicts to come. The writing here is careful not to overcomplicate the mythology. The Daughters of Atlas are presented as formidable and intelligent without needing exhaustive backstory. Their powers are displayed through action and visual cues, letting the audience infer capabilities and personality traits organically. This approach respects viewer intelligence and maintains narrative momentum. At the same time, comedic beats, often centered around the family's inexperience, prevent the story from becoming overly grim, preserving the tone established in the first film. Ultimately, the first part of Fury of the Gods is about balance, establishing high stakes, deepening character arcs, expanding the mythological scope, and maintaining the series' hallmark humor. It positions Billy and his family at the intersection of ordinary teenage life and extraordinary cosmic responsibility, creating a compelling setup for the next act where the conflicts intensify, alliances shift, and personal growth is tested against increasingly impossible odds. The story deepens as the Shazam family begins to grasp the true scope of their new challenges. In this second portion, the narrative deliberately shifts from establishing stakes to testing the characters under pressure. The Daughters of Atlas are no longer a distant threat. They actively engage in calculated confrontations that push each family member to their limits. The filmmakers use these sequences to explore individual character arcs in parallel with collective growth, ensuring that the audience remains invested in both personal and ensemble dynamics. Billy, as the central figure, faces the most nuanced development. His journey in this act is less about discovering power and more about understanding responsibility. Through encounters with both physical and ideological challenges, he is forced to confront uncomfortable truths. The Shazam powers are not merely tools for heroics. They are extensions of ancient authority. The realization that misusing these abilities could have consequences beyond personal risk creates a tension between youthful impulsiveness and the need for thoughtful action. These moments are often underscored with subtle humor, ensuring that the story retains the series' playful tone while exploring more mature themes. The foster siblings' arcs are similarly layered. Freddy's analytical tendencies are tested in high-stakes scenarios that demand quick improvisation, forcing him to reconcile his love for rules and logic with the unpredictability of real-world crises. Eugene's introverted nature is challenged as he assumes leadership in certain skirmishes, revealing hidden courage and strategic insight. Pedro's impulsiveness, often the source of comedic missteps, becomes an asset in scenarios requiring physical intuition and rapid response. Darla's enthusiasm, while chaotic, inspires creative solutions to otherwise intractable problems. Mary, balancing maturity and power, often mediates conflicts within the team, highlighting the family dynamic that grounds the narrative. These intertwined arcs ensure that the ensemble operates as a cohesive unit, rather than a series of isolated personalities. The Daughters of Atlas also gain depth in this act. Hespera continues to embody regal authority, her motivations rooted in a sense of justice and cosmic order. Calypso's strategic cunning introduces moral ambiguity, as she challenges the heroes not only physically, but ideologically. Anthea's complexity becomes more apparent. Her interactions with Billy and his family hint at the possibility of redemption, or at least divided loyalties. By presenting villains who operate on multiple levels, emotional, intellectual, and physical, the narrative avoids the trope of a one-dimensional antagonist, and instead offers a compelling mirror to the hero's growth. Key set pieces in this portion expand the narrative geography. The battle sequences are no longer confined to urban backdrops. They encompass mystical arenas, ancient ruins, and environments that blend earthly and divine elements. The visual effects are used not just for spectacle, but as storytelling tools. Lightning, magical barriers, and collapsing architecture are choreographed to reflect character decisions, emphasizing the link between choice and consequence. The filmmakers maintain clarity in these complex scenes through precise editing and spatial awareness, allowing viewers to track character actions amidst large-scale destruction. One narrative thread that becomes prominent here is the exploration of the Shazam power's origin. Interactions with relics and mythological artifacts provide historical context for the family's abilities, creating a sense of inherited responsibility. These discoveries raise philosophical questions. If powers are gifts from ancient entities, what obligations come with them? How should mortal heirs of divine authority behave? Billy wrestles with these questions throughout the act, driving both character development and thematic resonance. The story positions these dilemmas alongside action sequences, ensuring that reflection does not stall narrative momentum. The humor continues to function as an essential balancing element. Mistimed spells, sibling arguments mid-battle, and awkward attempts at heroics maintain the franchise's trademark levity. Yet these comedic beats are interwoven with genuine peril, creating stakes that feel immediate without overwhelming the audience with relentless tension. The combination of humor, mythological grandeur, and personal growth ensures the story remains engaging on multiple levels simultaneously. Midway through this act, the narrative introduces a pivotal turning point. A confrontation with the Daughters of Atlas reveals a vulnerability in the Shazam family's understanding of their own powers. The scene functions as both a literal battle and a metaphorical lesson. Experience, coordination, and strategic thinking are as crucial as raw strength. Failures during these encounters provide opportunities for reflection and recalibration, allowing each character to develop skills and confidence in ways that feel earned rather than convenient. The story emphasizes incremental growth, reinforcing the film's core message that heroism is a journey, not a single moment of triumph. Parallel to these physical and intellectual challenges, the act also explores interpersonal dynamics. Conflicts within the family, minor misunderstandings, egos clashing, and differing approaches to problem solving serve as microcosms of larger thematic concerns. By juxtaposing human relational struggles against divine-scale threats, the narrative underscores the importance of empathy, collaboration, and moral integrity. These interactions elevate the story beyond standard superhero fare, ensuring emotional investment alongside spectacle. This portion of the story also hints at the evolving mythology surrounding the antagonists. Through subtle cues, rituals, dialogue, and visual symbolism, the Daughters of Atlas are depicted as more than simple villains. Their motivations, while adversarial, are principled within their worldview. This ambiguity encourages the audience to question conventional definitions of good and evil, particularly in the context of inherited power. The narrative juxtaposition of the hero's learning curve against the villain's deliberate mastery of their abilities creates sustained tension and narrative richness. The act concludes with a dramatic escalation. The Shazam family faces a coordinated offensive by the Daughters of Atlas that pushes their powers, teamwork, and emotional resilience to the limit. This sequence serves as a narrative bridge to the final act, setting up higher stakes, deeper conflicts, and opportunities for resolution. Each failure and success in this stage contributes to a sense of cumulative growth, ensuring that the audience understands both the dangers at hand and the developmental arcs of the characters involved. As the story progresses into the third portion of the act, the stakes reach a critical peak, and the Shazam family is forced to confront challenges that test not only their powers, but their moral compass and unity as a team. By this point, the narrative has fully established the characters' personalities, strengths, weaknesses, and relationships, allowing the film to explore the consequences of their previous mistakes in a more layered way. The Daughters of Atlas are no longer merely looming threats. They have begun executing plans that put both the city and the family at existential risk, and their methods demonstrate a combination of strategic brilliance and ethical rigidity that forces the heroes to evolve quickly. The opening sequences of this portion focus on the aftermath of earlier skirmishes. The city bears the visible marks of magical and physical battles, collapsed buildings, scorched streets, and civilians coping with the chaos. This grounding in real-world consequences emphasizes that the film is committed to portraying the impact of superhero actions on ordinary life, a theme that runs consistently throughout the narrative. For Billy and his family, this serves as both motivation and pressure. Their powers are enormous, but missteps carry tangible repercussions. Billy himself experiences a significant internal arc here. He is increasingly aware that heroism is not a series of isolated victories, but a sustained responsibility. The narrative deliberately challenges his impulsive tendencies. In one sequence, he attempts a direct confrontation with Hespera, confident in his raw power, only to be outmaneuvered and humiliated. The defeat is not played merely for drama. It serves as a teaching moment, prompting Billy to reassess his approach, seek input from his siblings, and recognize that leadership requires humility. This progression reinforces one of the core themes of the film, that personal growth is inseparable from the acceptance of responsibility. Meanwhile, the foster siblings are also undergoing transformative experiences. Freddie, confronted with high-stakes strategic decisions, learns to balance analytical thinking with adaptability. Eugene, pushed beyond his comfort zone, discovers latent courage and resourcefulness that had previously gone untested. Pedro's impulsivity, often a comedic foil, proves instrumental in moments of physical crisis, while Darla's enthusiasm galvanizes the group into creative solutions. Mary functions as the emotional anchor and mediator, helping the team reconcile conflicting approaches. Collectively, these arcs illustrate a gradual but cohesive maturation of the ensemble, aligning personal growth with narrative stakes. The Daughters of Atlas are further developed in this section, with Anthea's character taking on increasing narrative significance. Unlike Hespera and Calypso, whose motives are primarily rooted in authority and strategy, Anthea exhibits signs of internal conflict, questioning the rigid course set by her sisters. These moments of doubt humanize her character and create opportunities for nuanced storytelling as the audience begins to anticipate potential shifts in allegiance or philosophical dialogue that may influence the climactic confrontation. By presenting multidimensional antagonists, the film elevates tension beyond physical battles and into ethical and ideological domains. Several key action sequences dominate this portion of the narrative, blending large-scale spectacle with character-driven stakes. Battles are choreographed to highlight both the team's learning curve and the escalating danger posed by the antagonists. The filmmakers make strategic use of visual effects, ensuring that magic, energy, and environmental destruction are not merely aesthetic flourishes, but narrative devices that reflect the characters' choices and consequences. Lightning strikes, magical barriers, and crumbling architecture are used in ways that require characters to improvise, emphasizing ingenuity over brute force. Humor remains an integral part of these sequences, often emerging from the family's inexperience. Mistimed spells, comedic misunderstandings, and sibling banter create levity amidst high tension. These moments prevent the narrative from becoming excessively grim, while reinforcing the relatability of characters who, despite godlike powers, remain fundamentally human in their fears, mistakes, and triumphs. A significant thematic layer is explored through the Shazam family's interaction with artifacts and locations tied to divine history. These encounters provide insight into the responsibilities and limitations inherent in wielding godlike abilities. Billy's reflections on the ethical use of power are reinforced visually and narratively, often juxtaposed against the disciplined, almost cold methodology of the Daughters of Atlas. This contrast underscores a persistent theme that true heroism is defined not just by strength, but by wisdom, empathy, and moral discernment. The narrative tension escalates as the antagonists execute a coordinated attack on a symbolic location connected to the source of the Shazam powers. This sequence tests every aspect of the family's growth: teamwork, trust, decision-making under pressure, and individual courage. The stakes are both personal and cosmic, highlighting the dual nature of the narrative as a coming-of-age story set against a mythologically charged backdrop. Each character faces moments of vulnerability and triumph, ensuring that victories feel earned and losses carry emotional weight. Midway through this segment, the film introduces pivotal strategic choices that alter the dynamics between heroes and villains. Billy and his siblings begin to devise creative solutions that leverage their unique abilities while compensating for inexperience. These sequences reinforce the thematic message that collaboration and adaptability are crucial components of heroism. The interplay between failure and adaptation also serves as a narrative engine, driving character growth while maintaining suspense. The act concludes with a high-stakes confrontation that leaves both the city and the Shazam family on the precipice of disaster. The Daughters of Atlas demonstrate their full power, pushing the heroes to the edge of their abilities. Yet, even in apparent defeat, the narrative carefully sets up pathways for character development, foreshadowing the strategies, alliances, and emotional breakthroughs that will culminate in the climactic resolution. By blending spectacle with personal stakes, this portion of the story ensures that the audience is both thrilled and emotionally invested, preparing the ground for the final act where consequences, choices, and growth converge in decisive action. The final portion of the story's core act shifts into what can best be described as the full escalation phase, where all narrative threads converge toward the film's climax. By this stage, the Shazam family has gained confidence in their powers, but still struggles with coordination and strategy. The Daughters of Atlas, having demonstrated their overwhelming skill and intelligence, now push the protagonists into situations where every mistake carries amplified consequences. This section of the story is about synthesis. The characters must combine everything they've learned about themselves, each other, and the moral weight of their powers to confront a threat that is as existential as it is immediate. Billy's leadership role becomes more pronounced here. He is forced to make split-second decisions that impact not just the battle, but the lives of those around him. The narrative emphasizes that raw strength alone cannot resolve the conflict. Moral judgment, empathy, and teamwork are equally critical. Moments where Billy hesitates, recalibrates, or chooses an unconventional strategy illustrate his evolution from a reactive, impulsive teenager to a proactive and thoughtful hero. These beats are handled with care, blending action, dialogue, and visual cues to convey internal struggle without slowing down the story's pace. The Foster siblings are given sequences that highlight both individual growth and collective synergy. Freddy's analytical mindset is leveraged to anticipate enemy moves. Eugene demonstrates courage and improvisational skill. Pedro uses his physical intuition to execute critical maneuvers. Darla's enthusiasm inspires moments of ingenuity, and Mary serves as the cohesive force that holds the team together emotionally. The film balances these arcs, ensuring that no one character dominates, while still allowing each sibling to shine in ways that reflect their established personalities. This treatment reinforces the idea that heroism in this story is relational, rather than purely individual. The antagonist's complexity deepens as well. Hespera continues to exude regal authority, Calypso exercises tactical precision, and Anthea's moral ambiguity becomes increasingly central to the unfolding events. Their actions challenge the Shazam family not just physically, but ethically, pushing the narrative into areas that explore the consequences of inherited power, the responsibilities of stewardship, and the costs of inaction. By the climax of this segment, the audience understands that victory requires more than defeating the villains. It requires the protagonist to integrate lessons of empathy, strategy, and teamwork under pressure. Several large-scale set pieces define this portion of the narrative. Battles extend across multiple environments, from urban landscapes to mystical arenas infused with divine energy. These sequences are meticulously choreographed, balancing visual spectacle with narrative clarity. Every magical strike, environmental hazard, and dynamic movement is designed to reflect character decisions and emotional stakes, ensuring that the audience can follow the action while appreciating the growth of the heroes. Humor continues to punctuate these sequences, particularly through missteps and sibling interactions, maintaining the film's tonal balance even in moments of intense tension. Narrative tension peaks when the Shazam family is faced with a direct confrontation that tests their unity. Individual weaknesses are exposed, forcing collaboration and sacrifice. The filmmakers emphasize the theme that personal growth and teamwork are inseparable. The family cannot overcome the threat unless they function as a cohesive unit. These sequences also highlight how previous failures have prepared the characters for this moment, reinforcing the cumulative nature of the story's structure and the importance of learning from mistakes. Simultaneously, the story addresses the moral and philosophical dimensions introduced earlier. The Daughters of Atlas serve as both literal and ideological adversaries, prompting reflection on the appropriate use of power, the tension between human imperfection and divine expectation, and the ethical obligations inherent in wielding extraordinary abilities. Billy and his siblings must navigate these questions while under immediate physical threat, blending ethical decision-making with survival. The narrative ensures that stakes are both external and internal, giving the climax multi-dimensional weight. Emotional resonance is further amplified through interpersonal moments. The Foster siblings support each other in ways that go beyond combat. Affirmations, apologies, shared victories, and reassurances underscore the narrative's core message about family, trust, and mutual respect. These beats prevent the action from feeling hollow and provide a human anchor that keeps viewers invested, even amidst large-scale magical chaos. The film effectively demonstrates that relational dynamics can be as compelling as physical confrontations in driving audience engagement. The act's final sequences escalate tension to near unbearable levels without resolving the conflict entirely. The Shazam family's powers are pushed to their limits, the villains demonstrate the full extent of their capabilities, and the city faces real danger. At the same time, seeds of strategic and emotional solutions are planted, foreshadowing the climactic resolution. This careful calibration ensures sustained engagement. Viewers feel both the weight of danger and the promise of meaningful resolution. By the end of this final portion, the narrative has achieved several critical objectives. It has advanced character arcs, established high-stakes conflict, explored moral complexity, expanded the mythological universe, and maintained the franchise's trademark humor and heart. The audience is positioned at the edge of resolution, emotionally invested in the characters, and primed for the final act, where thematic conclusions, character growth, and spectacle will converge for the ultimate payoff. The structure of this act exemplifies disciplined storytelling, escalating tension, multi-dimensional antagonists, cumulative character development, and tonal consistency, all of which ensure that the sequel is both entertaining and meaningful. Shazam! Fury of the Gods officially hit theaters on March 17, 2023, placing it in a slot that's both strategic and intriguing when you examine the broader industry context. March isn't traditionally the peak summer blockbuster window, which runs from May through early August, nor is it part of the lucrative holiday season. Yet, over the past decade, March has evolved into a surprisingly strong period for superhero and family-friendly films. Studios have realized that audiences are eager for high-concept entertainment year-round, and releasing Fury of the Gods in mid-March allowed Warner Brothers to capitalize on a less crowded market while still appealing to spring break audiences looking for fun, large-scale cinematic experiences. From an industry perspective, this timing also reflects the studio's confidence in the Shazam brand. By 2023, Warner Brothers had been navigating a shifting strategy for its DC Universe properties, particularly under the influence of leadership changes and evolving cinematic priorities. Unlike Marvel, which had established a rigorous, interconnected, phase-based approach, DC was experimenting with tone, continuity, and audience expectations. Fury of the Gods arrived at a moment when the studio was simultaneously reassessing the future of the DC Universe and leveraging the first Shazam film's unique appeal: humor, heart, and a focus on family dynamics rather than the weighty cosmic stakes that had dominated previous films. The broader cinematic landscape also shaped audience expectations. By 2023, the superhero genre had been thoroughly mainstreamed. Marvel Studios had just completed multiple phases of its interconnected universe, exploring both multiverse chaos and character-focused arcs across theatrical releases and streaming platforms. Audiences were savvy. They understood narrative stakes, character growth, and world-building mechanics, and they had grown accustomed to a certain level of spectacle. This context meant that Fury of the Gods had to deliver on multiple fronts. It had to provide visually engaging action, character-driven humor, and a coherent mythological narrative that could stand independently of larger universe constraints. Another industry consideration was the post-pandemic box office environment. The COVID-19 pandemic disrupted production schedules globally, delayed multiple films, and fundamentally changed viewing habits. By the time Fury of the Gods was released, audiences were increasingly comfortable returning to theaters, but streaming alternatives had grown in popularity. This made theatrical timing critical. A mid-March release gave the film breathing room to attract family audiences while avoiding competition from blockbuster-heavy summer or holiday seasons. Additionally, early 2023 saw other superhero films and franchise sequels strategically spaced across the calendar, and Warner Brothers positioned Shazam as an accessible, lighthearted option, in contrast to heavier, more densely plotted superhero entries. The marketing and promotional campaign also reflected this strategic positioning. Trailers, interviews, and online campaigns emphasized the film's tone, returning cast, and mythological stakes, clearly signaling that the movie was a continuation of the first film's spirit. Importantly, the studio highlighted both humor and spectacle, appealing to fans of the original, while also courting new viewers who might be drawn to epic action and family-friendly adventure. Social media teasers leveraged character dynamics, comedic set pieces, and glimpses of the divine antagonists, ensuring a broad demographic reach from teenagers to adults who appreciated the first installment. Industry analysts noted that the choice of March could be read as a hedge against oversaturation. By avoiding the direct competition of the summer blockbuster season, the film had a clearer runway to perform both financially and culturally. At the same time, the Shazam franchise had a built-in brand identity strong enough to attract audiences without relying on cross-promotional tie-ins from other DC properties. This independence was crucial, as it allowed the creative team to focus on the narrative and characters, rather than continuity-heavy considerations, a luxury few superhero franchises enjoy in 2023. Critically, the release also reflected Warner Brothers' broader strategy of maintaining diversity in its DC offerings. While other films leaned toward darker, more mature tones, Shazam continued to occupy a lighter, more comedic niche that differentiated it in the marketplace. The timing of release reinforced this positioning. audiences looking for fun, accessible superhero content early in the year could reliably turn to Shazam, creating a distinct audience segment within the broader superhero genre. Box office analysts further observed that the film's March release could influence its performance trajectory. Family-oriented films often benefit from spring school breaks and weekends that extend theatrical longevity. Additionally, early year releases can create momentum leading into summer merchandise opportunities, promotional partnerships, and international distribution. Warner Brothers' decision-making reflected a nuanced understanding of these factors, aiming to maximize both financial return and audience engagement in a transitional period for the global film market. From a cultural standpoint, the release also intersected with broader discussions about superhero storytelling. By 2023, audiences were increasingly critical of tone, narrative coherence, and character development. Shazam's focus on humor, family dynamics, and relatable adolescent experiences positioned it uniquely to stand out amid heavier, more complex franchises. This context highlights why the March 2023 release was both strategically and narratively appropriate. The film could offer something refreshing and accessible in a crowded market, while also reinforcing the studio's commitment to diversity in genre approaches. In summary, Shazam, Fury of the Gods' release date and industry context reflect a carefully considered strategy. The mid-March slot allowed the film to capitalize on audience availability, avoid oversaturated periods, and position the franchise as a family-friendly, character-driven alternative to heavier superhero fare. Coupled with post-pandemic audience behaviors, global box office dynamics, and DC's evolving cinematic strategy, the release timing underscores how the film's positioning was as deliberate as its narrative and tonal choices. By situating itself both temporally and culturally, the sequel was primed to engage audiences seeking a blend of humor, heart, and mythological spectacle. Fury of the Gods officially hit theaters on March 17, 2023, placing it in a slot that's both strategic and intriguing when you examine the broader industry context. March isn't traditionally the peak summer blockbuster window, which runs from May through early August, nor is it part of the lucrative holiday season. Yet, over the past decade, March has evolved into a surprisingly strong period for superhero and family-friendly films. Studios have realized that audiences are eager for high-concept entertainment year-round, and releasing Fury of the Gods in mid-March allowed Warner Brothers to capitalize on a less crowded market, while still appealing to spring break audiences looking for fun, large-scale cinematic experiences. From an industry perspective, this timing also reflects the studio's confidence in the Shazam brand. By 2023, Warner Brothers had been navigating a shifting strategy for its DC Universe properties, particularly under the influence of leadership changes and evolving cinematic priorities. Unlike Marvel, which had established a rigorous, interconnected, phase-based approach, DC was experimenting with tone, continuity, and audience expectations. Fury of the Gods arrived at a moment when the studio was simultaneously reassessing the future of the DC Universe and leveraging the first Shazam film's unique appeal: humor, heart, and a focus on family dynamics rather than the weighty cosmic stakes that had dominated previous films. The broader cinematic landscape also shaped audience expectations. By 2023, the superhero genre had been thoroughly mainstreamed. Marvel Studios had just completed multiple phases of its interconnected universe, exploring both multiverse chaos and character-focused arcs across theatrical releases and streaming platforms. Audiences were savvy. They understood narrative stakes, character growth, and world-building mechanics, and they had grown accustomed to a certain level of spectacle. This context meant that Fury of the Gods had to deliver on multiple fronts. It had to provide visually engaging action, character-driven humor, and a coherent mythological narrative that could stand independently of larger universe constraints. Another industry consideration was the post-pandemic box office environment. The COVID-19 pandemic disrupted production schedules globally, delayed multiple films, and fundamentally changed viewing habits. By the time Fury of the Gods was released, audiences were increasingly comfortable returning to theaters, but streaming alternatives had grown in popularity. This made theatrical timing critical. A mid-March release gave the film breathing room to attract family audiences, while avoiding competition from blockbuster-heavy summer or holiday seasons. Additionally, early 2023 saw other superhero films and franchise sequels strategically spaced across the calendar, and Warner Bros. Positioned Shazam as an accessible, lighthearted option, in contrast to heavier, more densely plotted superhero entries. The marketing and promotional campaign also reflected this strategic positioning. Trailers, interviews, and online campaigns emphasized the film's tone, returning cast, and mythological stakes, clearly signaling that the movie was a continuation of the first film's spirit. Importantly, the studio highlighted both humor and spectacle, appealing to fans of the original while also courting new viewers who might be drawn to epic action and family-friendly adventure. Social media teasers leveraged character dynamics, comedic set pieces, and glimpses of the divine antagonists, ensuring a broad demographic reach from teenagers to adults who appreciated the first installment. Industry analysts noted that the choice of March could be read as a hedge against oversaturation. By avoiding the direct competition of the summer blockbuster season, the film had a clearer runway to perform both financially and culturally. At the same time, the Shazam franchise had a built-in brand identity strong enough to attract audiences without relying on cross-promotional tie-ins from other DC properties. This independence was crucial, as it allowed the creative team to focus on the narrative and characters rather than continuity-heavy considerations, a luxury few superhero franchises enjoy in 2023. Critically, the release also reflected Warner Bros.' broader strategy of maintaining diversity in its DC offerings. While other films leaned toward darker, more mature tones, Shazam continued to occupy a lighter, more comedic niche that differentiated it in the marketplace. The timing of release reinforced this positioning. Audiences looking for fun, accessible superhero content early in the year could reliably turn to Shazam, creating a distinct audience segment within the broader superhero genre. Box office analysts further observed that the film's March release could influence its performance trajectory. Family-oriented films often benefit from spring school breaks and weekends that extend theatrical longevity. Additionally, early-year releases can create momentum leading into summer merchandise opportunities, promotional partnerships, and international distribution. Warner Bros.' decision-making reflected a nuanced understanding of these factors, aiming to maximize both financial return and audience engagement in a transitional period for the global film market. From a cultural standpoint, the release also intersected with broader discussions about superhero storytelling. By 2023, audiences were increasingly critical of tone, narrative coherence, and character development. Shazam's focus on humor, family dynamics, and relatable adolescent experiences positioned it uniquely to stand out amid heavier, more complex franchises. This context highlights why the March 2023 release was both strategically and narratively appropriate. The film could offer something refreshing and accessible in a crowded market, while also reinforcing the studio's commitment to diversity in genre approaches. In summary, Shazam! Fury of the Gods' release date and industry context reflect a carefully considered strategy. The mid-March slot allowed the film to capitalize on audience availability, avoid oversaturated periods, and position the franchise as a family-friendly, character-driven alternative to heavier superhero fare. Coupled with post-pandemic audience behaviors, global box office dynamics, and DC's evolving cinematic strategy, the release timing underscores how the film's positioning was as deliberate as its narrative and tonal choices. By situating itself both temporally and culturally, the sequel was primed to engage audiences seeking a blend of humor, heart, and mythological spectacle. The cast of Shazam! Fury of the Gods is a fascinating study in ensemble dynamics, and part of what makes the film resonate is how carefully each actor embodies both their teenage and superhero selves. At the center of it all is Zachary Levi, reprising his role as the adult superhero form of Billy Batson. Levi's performance is the emotional and comedic anchor of the film. What he brings to the character is a kind of unpolished charm, A hero who is immensely powerful, yet retains the uncertainty, excitement, and humor of a teenager navigating responsibilities he's only just begun to understand. His timing, particularly in comedic sequences, feels effortless, but it's his subtle vulnerability that adds depth. You can see that underneath the lightning bolts and heroic poses, Billy is still figuring out who he is and what it means to be a hero. Paired with Levi is Asher Angel, who continues as Billy's teenage counterpart. Angel's performance provides the emotional backbone of the story, outside the superhero form. His portrayal captures the internal struggles of adolescence, doubt, insecurity, and curiosity, while grounding the fantasy elements in human relatability. Watching Levi and Angel effectively play two halves of the same character creates a dynamic interplay that is surprisingly rare in superhero films. It's not just that the two actors mimic each other, they complement and contrast each other, emphasizing both the power and the innocence that Billy carries simultaneously. The Foster siblings also return, each with a dual portrayal. Freddie Freeman, played in his teenage form by Jack Dylan Grazer and in his superhero form by Adam Brody, is one of the most compelling examples of duality. Grazer gives Freddie a nerdy, enthusiastic energy, portraying someone who is fascinated by superheroes, yet unsure of his own abilities. Brody, in contrast, channels the adult superhero persona with a sardonic, confident energy, creating a layered character that is both relatable and aspirational. Their scenes together highlight the comedy inherent in a teenager suddenly inhabiting superhuman powers, while also emphasizing character growth. Mary Bromfield, portrayed by Grace Caroline Curry, also undergoes this dual representation, though in the sequel, Curry plays both the teenage and superhero versions. Her performance balances strength and emotional maturity, providing a grounding presence amid the chaos. Mary's role is particularly significant in moments of conflict and mediation among the siblings, reflecting her position as the emotional core of the family. Eugene Choi, in his superhero form played by Ross Butler, embodies confidence and composure, complementing Eugene's more introspective teenage personality. Pedro Peña's adult version, portrayed by DJ Catrona, provides both humor and muscle, reflecting the character's gentle yet physically imposing nature. Darla Dudley, as the most enthusiastic and exuberant sibling, is portrayed in her adult form by Megan Good, whose performance captures both the joy and chaos that Darla brings to the team. The antagonists of the film are equally compelling. Helen Mirren plays Hespera, the eldest daughter of Atlas. Her presence is commanding, immediately establishing her as a formidable force without overt exposition. Mirren's subtle gestures, measured dialogue, and regal posture convey millennia of wisdom and authority, making her threat feel tangible and sophisticated. Calypso, played by Lucy Liu, provides a sharp contrast. Calculated, strategic, and morally ambiguous, she is a villain whose intelligence and meticulous planning create tension that extends beyond physical confrontations. Anthea, portrayed by Rachel Zegler, introduces a different kind of tension. Her character's motivations are layered and somewhat conflicted, hinting at complexity that extends beyond traditional villain archetypes. Director David F. Sandberg plays a critical role in bringing this ensemble to life. Known for his work in horror and thriller films like Lights Out and Annabelle Creation, Sandberg leverages his skill in tension building, pacing, and visual storytelling to create sequences where ensemble coordination feels realistic, even when dealing with mythological chaos. His direction ensures that each actor's performance is both distinct and harmonized within the group dynamic, allowing humor, heart, and spectacle to coexist without diminishing the stakes of either. Supporting cast members add further depth and nuance. Teachers, city officials, and civilians provide a grounded counterpoint to the high-octane action, reminding viewers of the human consequences of superhero interventions. These roles, though smaller, are crucial for anchoring the film's fantasy elements in relatable reality, and the actors bring authenticity and subtlety to these moments, enhancing the overall narrative texture. The interplay between returning actors and new additions is another key strength. Returning cast members provide continuity, building on established chemistry and audience familiarity, while newcomers, particularly the Daughters of Atlas, expand the narrative scope and introduce fresh energy. This balance allows the sequel to feel both familiar and excitingly new. The filmmakers are deliberate in allowing each actor room to explore their character without overwhelming ensemble scenes, creating a rhythm that is both dynamic and emotionally resonant. Costume and visual design also support character development. Each superhero transformation is carefully tailored to reflect personality traits. Billy's bold, lightning-infused suit communicates youthful energy and power. Mary's design emphasizes agility and balance. Eugene's sleek form highlights strategy and precision. Pedro's musculature and design reinforce physical strength tempered by compassion. Darla's bright, enthusiastic costume mirrors her exuberant personality. The antagonists' costumes reinforce both their divine heritage and their philosophical leanings, visually signaling authority, cunning, and moral complexity. In essence, the cast of Fury of the Gods functions as more than a collection of performers. It is the core engine driving the film's narrative, humor, and emotional resonance. Each actor, whether portraying hero or villain, contributes layers of depth, personality, and relatability that transform what could be a typical superhero spectacle into a story about family, responsibility, and the human experience intersecting with mythological power. At its heart, Shazam! Fury of the Gods is about the collision of extraordinary power with everyday human experience. And that tension drives the narrative in ways that are both fun and emotionally engaging. The plot follows Billy Batson and his foster siblings as they navigate the responsibilities of their newly acquired powers, balancing ordinary teenage life with the chaotic demands of being superheroes. From the outset, the film establishes a tone that is simultaneously epic and intimate, blending large-scale magical battles with personal, relatable challenges that keep the story grounded. One of the film's central threads is the idea of growth, both personal and collective. Billy, who has been living with the duality of his teenage self and superhero form, continues to grapple with the limits and responsibilities of his powers. Unlike many superhero narratives that focus primarily on external conflict, Fury of the Gods emphasizes internal stakes. Characters must learn to trust themselves, coordinate as a family, and make decisions that have lasting consequences. This narrative choice ensures that every action scene carries emotional weight, because the audience is invested not just in the spectacle, but in how each hero responds to pressure, uncertainty, and moral dilemmas. The antagonist force in the film introduces a mythological element that elevates the story beyond traditional superhero fare. The Daughters of Atlas, each with distinct personalities, strategies, and moral frameworks, present challenges that are physical, intellectual, and ethical. Their motivations are nuanced, and the film spends time illustrating why they believe their actions are justified. This approach encourages viewers to engage with the conflict on multiple levels, considering not just who will win, but also the philosophical and ethical dimensions of power, inheritance, and responsibility. The family dynamic remains the narrative's emotional core. Each foster sibling has their own personality, strengths, and weaknesses, and the plot frequently places them in situations where teamwork is essential. Humor arises organically from these interactions, as mismatched personalities, differing approaches to problem solving, and inevitable mistakes create comic moments without undermining the stakes. At the same time, the story uses these interactions to highlight personal growth, as the siblings learn to adapt, compromise, and support one another under increasingly difficult circumstances. Action sequences are a major driver of the plot, but they are carefully balanced with narrative clarity. Battles are choreographed to showcase individual powers, team dynamics, and strategic thinking, ensuring that the audience can follow both the spectacle and the story. Magic, superhuman abilities, and mythological creatures are depicted in ways that are visually impressive, yet narratively meaningful, often reflecting character choices and consequences. This balance prevents the film from becoming overwhelming and keeps the focus on character development amid the larger scale events. A recurring theme in the plot is the exploration of legacy and power. Through interactions with magical artifacts, divine relics, and the antagonists themselves, the heroes learn that their abilities are part of a larger cosmic framework. This element introduces stakes beyond the immediate city-level threat, hinting at responsibilities that stretch across history and myth. Yet the narrative manages to keep these themes accessible, grounding them in character experiences so that viewers can connect emotionally, even without detailed prior knowledge of mythology or the larger DC universe. Comedy and levity are integrated seamlessly into the plot. Moments of humor are never forced. Instead, they arise naturally from character interactions, situational mishaps, and the contrast between teenage behavior and superhero responsibilities. These comedic beats provide relief amid high-stakes scenarios, enhancing the pacing and making the characters' journeys more relatable. This tonal balance is one of the franchise's defining qualities, allowing the story to feel both epic and personal simultaneously. The narrative structure also emphasizes cause and effect storytelling. Early decisions made by the characters reverberate throughout the plot, creating a sense of continuity and consequence. Mistakes are not simply convenient obstacles. They influence subsequent challenges, drive character development, and contribute to escalating tension. This approach ensures that the audience remains engaged, anticipating both the outcomes of immediate conflicts and the long-term implications for the characters and their world. Visual storytelling is a critical aspect of the plot. From the bustling urban settings to the awe-inspiring mythological realms, environments are designed to support narrative clarity while enhancing spectacle. Each location serves a purpose. Battles are staged to challenge the heroes strategically. Interactions with magical artifacts reveal character insights, and the contrast between ordinary life and divine chaos reinforces the thematic tension between adolescence and heroism. The plot also explores identity in a layered way. Billy and his siblings must reconcile their human selves with their superhuman forms, learning to navigate the expectations, responsibilities, and consequences of wielding immense power. This duality drives both the story and the humor, providing relatable entry points for audiences while keeping the narrative engaging and dynamic. In addition, the pacing of the film's plot is carefully calibrated. Action, humor, and emotional beats are interwoven so that the story flows naturally, building tension without overwhelming the audience. Set pieces escalate logically, with each challenge more complex than the last, while quieter moments allow characters to reflect, bond, and grow. This rhythm reinforces the central themes of teamwork, responsibility, and the personal costs of heroism, ensuring that the film is both entertaining and meaningful. The climax, while visually spectacular, remains rooted in character decisions. The narrative payoff hinges on the growth, teamwork, and moral choices of the heroes, rather than relying solely on spectacle. This approach maintains audience investment and reinforces the story's thematic core, that heroism is defined by courage, empathy, and collaboration as much as by superhuman abilities. Ultimately, the plot of Shazam: Fury of the Gods balances multiple layers: teenage coming of age, family dynamics, epic mythology, and superhero spectacle, without losing coherence. It emphasizes emotional resonance alongside visual spectacle, character development alongside mythological stakes, and humor alongside tension. The film is structured to appeal to both longtime fans of the first movie and new audiences seeking a superhero story that blends heart, comedy, and thrilling action, making it a standout in the genre for 2023. Watching Shazam: Fury of the Gods as a fan of the first film and a seasoned critic, I can say that it manages the rare feat of being both fun and substantive. The sequel delivers on spectacle without sacrificing character, and it deepens the franchise's thematic core. From the opening moments, the film establishes that this is a story about growth, both personal and collective, while promising an entertaining, action-packed ride. Zachary Levi continues to anchor the film with his charismatic portrayal of the superhero Billy Batson. What I find remarkable is Levi's ability to maintain a lighthearted, playful energy while still conveying genuine stakes. The humor feels organic. His expressions, timing, and physical comedy elevate moments that in lesser hands could have felt slapstick. Yet, underneath the jokes, there's an emotional through line. Levi portrays Billy as someone who is learning what responsibility truly means, and that tension between power and adolescence drives the story's heart. Asher Angel's contribution is equally vital. His portrayal of Billy's teenage self offers a grounding contrast to Levi's superhero form. Angel captures the uncertainty, curiosity, and vulnerability of adolescence in a way that makes the character relatable. Together, Levi and Angel create a duality that is more than a gimmick. It is central to the emotional resonance of the film. Their chemistry with the ensemble cast ensures that every scene, whether comedic, tense, or action-driven, feels cohesive. The supporting cast excels in making the Shazam family feel authentic. Jack Dylan Grazer, Grace Caroline Curry, Ross Butler, DJ Catrona, Megan Good, and Adam Brody each bring depth to their dual roles. Humor, tension, and emotional beats are shared across the ensemble in ways that feel earned. The film emphasizes their interdependence, and the narrative doesn't shy away from showing how mistakes, disagreements, and miscalculations affect both the team dynamic and the stakes of the story. This approach makes the action sequences more meaningful. Every decision has consequence, and every victory feels hard-won. The villains portrayed by Helen Mirren, Lucy Liu, and Rachel Zegler are particularly impressive. Mirren as Hespera carries a regal authority that immediately commands attention. Her presence feels weighty without overshadowing the heroes. Liu's Calypso introduces a tactical and intellectual dimension, while Zegler's Anthea adds complexity and moral ambiguity. Unlike many superhero sequels where antagonists are merely obstacles for spectacle, here the villains are thoughtfully developed, which makes confrontations feel layered rather than one-dimensional. Their motivations are clear and nuanced, providing a sense of realism to the mythological framework. Visually, the film is stunning. David F. Sandberg and his cinematography team maintain a keen balance between spectacle and clarity. The magical effects, from lightning strikes to elaborate environmental destruction, never overwhelm the story. They serve narrative functions, emphasizing both character choices and escalating stakes. The action choreography is dynamic yet coherent, ensuring that viewers can follow what's happening even in large-scale battles. The blend of urban and mythological environments reinforces the story's central tension. Everyday teens navigating extraordinary circumstances. Tone management is another strength. The film juggles humor, action, and heart effectively, avoiding tonal whiplash. Comedy is never forced. It arises naturally from character personalities, situations, and the contrast between mortal and superhuman perspectives. The stakes remain palpable, and emotional moments land precisely because they are grounded in well-established relationships. Sandberg's direction demonstrates a strong understanding of rhythm, allowing the audience to experience tension, relief, and catharsis in a balanced sequence. Pacing is handled carefully. While the first act lays foundation and character stakes, the midsection escalates challenges gradually, building tension and emphasizing growth. By the time the climactic sequences arrive, the audience is fully invested in both the action and the characters' journeys. This pacing ensures that the film feels continuous, cohesive, and engaging across its runtime, avoiding fatigue or disengagement despite the complex mythological stakes. Thematically, the film succeeds in exploring responsibility, identity, and family dynamics. The Shazam family's growth is portrayed with nuance. They make mistakes, learn from them, and rely on each other to overcome increasingly formidable challenges. These themes are integrated seamlessly into both narrative and spectacle, making the story emotionally resonant even amid large-scale battles and visual effects sequences. The film communicates that heroism is not only about strength or magical abilities, but also about empathy, moral judgment, and collaboration. There are, of course, minor criticisms. Some sequences, particularly in the latter half, lean heavily on visual spectacle. occasionally risking overshadowing quieter character moments. Certain comedic beats may feel uneven depending on audience taste, though most land effectively due to strong ensemble chemistry. Additionally, viewers less familiar with the first film may need a brief adjustment period to understand character dynamics fully, though the narrative provides enough context for new audiences to engage meaningfully. Overall, Fury of the Gods is a sequel that understands what made the original successful and expands upon it intelligently. It balances humor, heart, action, and mythology in a way that is accessible yet satisfying for more analytical viewers. The ensemble cast delivers emotionally resonant performances. The villains are compelling and layered, and the direction ensures both clarity and spectacle. For audiences seeking a superhero film that blends epic fantasy, humor, and meaningful character development, this film stands out as one of the more thoughtfully executed DC Universe entries in recent years. Shazam! Fury of the Gods is packed with subtle details and Easter eggs that enrich the experience for attentive viewers. One of the most interesting elements is how the film visually and narratively references classic DC Comics lore. From costume designs to magical artifacts, fans familiar with Shazam's comic history will notice nods to iconic panels and storylines, such as the depiction of the Rock of Eternity and the incorporation of magical relics that have appeared in earlier comics. These elements are carefully integrated, so they enhance the story without confusing casual audiences. A major hidden detail revolves around the Daughters of Atlas. Each sister's powers are visually distinct and thoughtfully tied to their personalities and philosophical outlooks. Hespera's mastery of raw, destructive power mirrors her authoritarian and commanding personality. Calypso's precision and calculated approach reflect her strategic intelligence. Anthea's abilities, which fluctuate in intensity, are symbolic of her internal conflict and moral ambiguity, a subtle visual storytelling choice that adds depth to her character. Fans of mythology may notice that their powers are inspired by lesser-known mythological references, demonstrating the filmmaker's commitment to layering authenticity beneath the surface spectacle. The film also embeds numerous foreshadowing beats for potential future entries in the Shazam franchise. Small details in dialogue, set dressing, and magical lore hint at challenges the family may face later. For instance, when the Shazam family interacts with ancient relics, the inscriptions and symbols are not just decorative. They reference cosmic rules and divine contracts, implying a broader universe beyond what is shown on screen. Attentive viewers can spot clues about alliances, future villains, and even the potential evolution of the Shazam powers. One of the most clever aspects of the movie is how it uses humor as a narrative device to reveal character traits. Several comedic sequences, like Freddy experimenting with powers or Darla causing unintended chaos, are not only funny, but also serve to show growth, teamwork, and adaptability. These moments reinforce the story's themes subtly, proving that even jokes can carry weight in storytelling when used deliberately. Visual effects are another area rich with hidden detail. Lightning strikes often trace patterns that correspond to character choices, while the magical energy surrounding the Daughters of Atlas sometimes mirrors their emotional states. Environmental destruction, too, is carefully orchestrated. Collapsing buildings and debris often interact with characters in ways that reflect their learning curves or mistakes, adding an extra layer of visual storytelling. The filmmakers use these cues to reward viewers who pay close attention, enhancing engagement without distracting from the main narrative. The movie also includes nods to prior DC films and pop culture. For example, subtle Easter eggs reference the first Shazam film, acknowledging past victories and mistakes. There are also playful nods to other DC heroes, though these are brief and avoid feeling like forced crossovers. These inclusions provide fans with insider recognition and create a sense of continuity without alienating new viewers. Character-specific hidden details are equally intriguing. Billy's superhero suit contains minor variations that reflect his growth. Subtle changes in design, color intensity, or lightning effects signal moments of personal development or increased mastery over powers. Similarly, Each sibling's suit changes slightly during critical sequences, visually emphasizing teamwork, confidence, or emotional state. The filmmakers leverage these visual cues to communicate internal narrative arcs without explicit exposition. Sound design is another hidden gem. The score by Rupert Gregson-Williams incorporates leitmotifs tied to each character. Billy and Freddie share a light, heroic theme, while Hespera's motif carries a regal, imposing resonance. Subtle variations in musical cues highlight changes in tone, character growth, or narrative tension. These sonic layers are easy to miss on casual viewing, but significantly enhance the emotional texture and storytelling depth. Finally, the film rewards repeat viewings. Several sequences are constructed with multiple layers of narrative and visual information that may not be apparent the first time. From the interactions between siblings to magical artifacts in the background, each viewing can reveal new connections, thematic parallels, and foreshadowing hints. This layered approach ensures the film appeals both to casual viewers looking for entertainment and fans who enjoy piecing together narrative puzzles. In summary, Fury of the Gods is a sequel rich in hidden details, thoughtful character development, and carefully crafted visual and auditory storytelling. From Easter eggs to mythological references, subtle foreshadowing, and character-driven humor, the film rewards attentive audiences while maintaining accessibility for newcomers. These layered elements not only deepen engagement, but also reinforce the narrative's themes of growth, responsibility, and family, making it more than just a flashy superhero sequel. Shazam, Fury of the Gods has all the ingredients to perform exceptionally at the box office, and analyzing why reveals both strategic planning and organic strengths. First and foremost, the film combines humor, heart, and spectacle, a trifecta that appeals to a broad demographic. Unlike some superhero movies that skew heavily toward teen or adult audiences, Shazam has maintained a family-friendly tone, while still offering enough action and visual intensity to engage older viewers. This cross-generational appeal is a major factor in blockbuster potential. The ensemble cast significantly contributes to this appeal. Returning actors like Zachary Levi and Asher Angel bring continuity, charisma, and fan loyalty. Meanwhile, powerhouse additions like Helen Mirren, Lucy Liu, and Rachel Zegler elevate the antagonists to memorable status, creating tension that keeps viewers invested. When a film balances a strong, relatable protagonist with compelling, multi-layered villains, it increases emotional stakes, a critical ingredient for repeat viewings and strong word-of-mouth promotion. Timing and marketing strategy further enhance blockbuster potential. Releasing in mid-March allows the film to capitalize on spring break audiences and avoid the crowded summer blockbuster season, giving it a clearer runway to generate revenue. The marketing campaign emphasized humor, spectacle, and family dynamics, effectively signaling the film's tone and target audience. This reduces the risk of audience mismatch, a factor that can impact box office returns for films that miscommunicate their genre or style. Thematically, the film resonates widely because it blends universal experiences with fantastical stakes. Audiences relate to the struggles of adolescence, teamwork, and responsibility, while also enjoying the mythological scale and magical elements. This duality allows the film to be accessible to casual viewers while offering depth for more discerning audiences, an approach that often translates into stronger engagement, repeat viewings, and positive critical reception. Action sequences and visual effects are also a major selling point. High-quality CGI, imaginative magical battles, and carefully choreographed fights provide the kind of spectacle that draws audiences to theaters. The filmmakers successfully balance clarity and excitement, ensuring that even complex sequences are understandable while still visually thrilling. When action is both spectacular and narratively meaningful, films tend to perform better in both domestic and international markets, particularly in territories where blockbuster spectacle drives ticket sales. Humor and tone management set this film apart in the crowded superhero landscape. Many superhero sequels struggle with tonal consistency, especially when juggling comedy, drama, and epic action. Fury of the Gods manages this seamlessly, keeping comedic beats organic and grounded in character, while still delivering high-stakes action. This careful tonal balance makes the film appealing to multiple audience segments, including families, teens, and adult viewers who enjoy clever, character-driven humor alongside spectacle. International marketability is another factor in blockbuster potential. Mythological themes, visually striking characters, and universal themes of family and growth translate across cultures. The Daughters of Atlas, for example, are mythically grounded characters with a visual and narrative appeal that resonates globally. The ensemble cast, which includes actors with international recognition, also helps broaden appeal. These factors increase the likelihood of strong overseas performance, which is often crucial for modern blockbuster success. Franchise potential further bolsters its blockbuster credentials. The film sets up narrative threads for future entries without relying on heavy-handed cliffhangers, creating anticipation for potential sequels or spin-offs. By establishing a rich mythological framework, compelling character arcs, and unresolved questions about powers and responsibilities, the film encourages audience investment beyond a single viewing. This long-term narrative strategy is essential for franchise sustainability and can drive consistent box office performance over multiple films. Merchandising and brand synergy add an additional revenue layer. Shazam's appeal to younger audiences, combined with iconic costume designs and visually striking powers, creates opportunities for toys, apparel, and collectibles. Films that successfully integrate merchandising potential into their visual and narrative design often see amplified profitability beyond the box office, reinforcing their status as blockbusters. Finally, positive audience reception and critical acclaim amplify blockbuster potential. By prioritizing character development, humor, and spectacle in equal measure, the film is positioned to generate strong word-of-mouth recommendations. In an era where social media buzz and audience reviews significantly influence ticket sales, films that deliver both entertainment and emotional resonance are more likely to sustain high performance throughout their theatrical run. In summary, Shazam! Fury of the Gods has blockbuster potential because it blends humor, heart, spectacle, and mythology. Features a talented ensemble cast, benefits from strategic release timing, maintains tonal consistency, appeals to multiple demographic segments, offers international marketability, sets up franchise potential, and integrates merchandising opportunities. Together, these factors create a film that is not only entertaining and emotionally resonant, but also strategically positioned to perform strongly in the competitive superhero landscape. As the credits roll on Shazam! Fury of the Gods, what lingers is more than just the visual spectacle or the laughter from comedic moments. It's a sense of heart and connection that resonates beyond the screen. This is a film that reminds audiences that superhero stories aren't only about fights and powers, but about family, responsibility, and personal growth. Billy and his foster siblings are not perfect, and that imperfection is precisely what makes them relatable. The narrative drives home that heroism is a journey, not an innate trait, and that the most significant victories are often internal rather than external. The overarching theme that emerges is the importance of unity. Throughout the film, the characters face challenges that could easily overwhelm them individually. Yet by learning to rely on one another and value each other's strengths, they achieve outcomes that would otherwise be impossible. This focus on family, both biological and chosen, creates an emotional anchor for the story, giving weight to otherwise fantastical or mythological stakes. It's a theme that resonates universally, whether viewers are teenagers navigating identity or adults reflecting on the importance of supportive communities. Humor, too, is more than entertainment in this narrative. It's a tool that shapes character and story. The film cleverly uses comedic beats to reveal vulnerabilities, test relationships, and even advance the plot. By interweaving laughter with tension, Fury of the Gods ensures that audiences are emotionally engaged at multiple levels, making moments of triumph and reflection all the more satisfying. The mythology woven into the story also underscores the narrative's emotional depth. The Daughters of Atlas, with their distinct personalities and motivations, serve as mirrors for the heroes, challenging them to consider the ethical dimensions of power. The interplay between divine stakes and human choices creates a tension that elevates the story beyond a typical action comedy. It reminds viewers that strength alone isn't enough. Wisdom, empathy, and moral courage are equally crucial. From a visual perspective, the film leaves a lasting impression. The magical sequences, vibrant costumes, and imaginative settings create a world that feels alive, expansive, and cohesive. Yet, even amidst spectacular battles and explosive action, the filmmakers never lose sight of character-driven storytelling. Every fight, magical strike, or dramatic set piece is tied to character growth, reinforcing the film's thematic foundation while delivering high entertainment value. Perhaps most importantly, the film's outro leaves space for reflection. By resolving major conflicts while leaving threads for future stories, it reinforces the notion that growth is ongoing and that challenges, both personal and external, continue even after a victory. This approach not only sets the stage for potential sequels, but also mirrors the real-world process of learning and evolving, allowing audiences to connect with the characters on a personal level. Ultimately, the enduring theme of Shazam, Fury of the Gods, is about embracing responsibility, valuing relationships, and understanding that true heroism is as much about heart as it is about power. It's a story that blends laughter, spectacle, and emotional resonance in a way that lingers, encouraging viewers to reflect on their own strengths, challenges, and the people they rely on in life. The outro leaves audiences not just entertained, but thoughtfully engaged, carrying the film's messages well beyond the theater. If you've made it this far, you already know that this channel is dedicated to giving you honest, in-depth, and high-quality reviews of Hollywood movies, whether it's a highly anticipated blockbuster or a hidden gem waiting to be discovered. Here, you won't find clickbait or overhyped takes. Every review is crafted to help you understand a movie's story, production, cast, industry context, and hidden details in a way that's thorough, analytical, and genuinely engaging. We dive deep into trailers, plot structure, character arcs, themes, and visual storytelling. We also explore release strategies, box office potential, and behind-the-scenes facts that most reviews overlook. This channel is perfect for fans who want to know not just whether a movie is good or bad, but why it works or doesn't, from both an artistic and industry perspective. By subscribing, you join a community that appreciates thoughtful, honest, and detailed movie analysis. We cover everything from superhero sequels like Shazam, Fury of the Gods, to cinematic blockbusters, upcoming releases, and classic films, giving you insight you won't find in generic YouTube reviews. Whether you want to understand story mechanics, character development, industry strategy, or hidden Easter eggs, we've got you covered. So hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and make sure you don't miss any of our deep dives into the movies you love and the blockbusters you're excited about. This is your go-to channel for honest, detailed, and engaging Hollywood movie reviews, where every film gets the analysis it deserves.